the level of stupidity that has gone into insisting on running Biden as the presumptive nominee. Political malpractice. Uncommitted was the most successful opposition candidate in the primary. That's amazing. The most predictable thing that could have happened has happened, and everyone's hair is on fire. What they could have done. Breaking news, Biden just dropped out. Oh, holy shit. Okay. My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Someone should put like the, the Independence Day soundtrack here. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding the nation, blah, 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 touting his record. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and, more blah, blah, blah. It has been the great honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all of those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all of this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. Okay. Yeah, this is big. So open convention, it seems to be, so the speculation that I've seen about this, the people who are pretty well informed about the inner workings of the Democratic Party were saying that it didn't seem like Biden was going to endorse Kamala Harris specifically. It seems like it's going to be an open convention, that there's basically going to be like 3 or 4 candidates. My personal favorite of the options that are available is Gretchen Whitmer. I think the most likely candidate is still Kamala Harris for technical legal reasons that the campaign funds that Biden has can only be passed on to Kamala Harris. But all of the super PAC money that is independent expenditure, which is most of the money in the race, most of the political spending is super PACs that are independent. They can spend the money for whoever they want. So all of that money doesn't have to go towards Kamala, but Kamala is in a better starting position ahead of the convention for this. Who are allowed to vote for the candidates in an open convention? The individual, the delegates of the Democratic Party. Basically, the conventions kind of work similarly to the Electoral College. For those who don't know, for those who aren't like steeped into American politics, the Electoral College, the U.S. elections, there's a great CGP Grey video that is probably copyright. I don't know if I can play the CGP Grey video on its own. U.S. elections are a very indirect thing. When you're a U.S. citizen and you vote, you're not actually voting in the election. What you're doing is your vote as a citizen is an advisory opinion that you're passing on to the delegates, the electoral voters of your state. Electoral voters are allowed to disregard if they want to. Now, that is incredibly rare and basically has never happened, but technically they're allowed to. For the reasoning was back in the day where the Constitution was written that if something happened, because there wasn't instantaneous communication back in the day, there wasn't any 24-hour news channels or anything like that. News traveled really slowly. So if something happened between the moment that people cast their ballots, where they may be uninformed about some of the latest developments, and the moment that the actual official event of the actual election where the electoral college electors cast their actual ballots, if there's been new developments that would affect those votes, they're technically allowed to vote differently from what their state told them to do. The conventions work similarly except the distribution of delegates are different, and the super delegates are another thing. Like it's more complicated, but it's kind of similar where primaries are kind of advisory things, and the actual decision of who the candidate is comes down to the people who are voting in the convention, which is not individual people. So right now, because there wasn't a proper primary, because the Democratic Party has been incredibly stupid and irresponsible, which I don't even know if I'm going to get into like the level of stupidity that has gone into insisting on running Biden as the presumptive nominee for so long, and their refusal to run any kind of primary is like political malpractice, is like unbelievably irresponsible. Back when it became clear that Biden would be the establishment candidate, and there were like two people who ran the primary, there was or three people. There was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., there was, what's her name, Marianne Williamson, and there were like Dean Phillips. No one has heard about Dean Phillips. Jason Palmer didn't even like Dean Phillips. I'd heard his name. Jason Palmer, never heard of him. They're not even listing they are listing RFK, okay? And Marianne Williamson. These are incredibly long shot. Like there's no Gretchen Whitmer here. There's no Kamala Harris here. That would have been weird for Kamala Harris to run against her boss, her current boss, or running mates or whatever. Uncommitted was the most successful opposition candidate in the primary. That's amazing. Everyone mocked Marianne Williamson. I actually liked her. Yeah, no, Marianne Williamson is fine. Gavin Newsom is the name that I was looking for. Marianne Williamson is fine. It's just that she's not establishment friendly, which is why I like her too. I think, but the fact that she's not establishment friendly also makes her a more of a long shot candidate that would have been harder to beat. For her to beat Trump, or maybe not. Maybe the fact that she's anti-establishment gives her makes her more likely to get some of the anti-establishment voters who are voting for Trump because they don't like the establishment. Well, I don't know. That is a lot of speculation there. That's more complicated. I don't think Marianne Williamson would have actually had a chance, but she was a positive influence in like bringing this topic to the table, which is what these kinds of candidates are for. Williamson was Biden's final primary challenger. Uncommitted was Biden's final primary challenger, to be honest. But yeah, when they announced that Biden would be the nominee, essentially, when they announced that he was running for re-election, and none of the high-profile names decided to run in the primary, so many people were saying, this is crazy. This is insane. And I heard some of the logic. There was a daily episode, the New York Times podcast, that talked about the reasoning behind their decision to run Biden for re-election, despite everyone thinking he's too old, despite the overwhelming, even back then, the overwhelming concern about his age was just a pure like mathematical thing of, well, the way things are, and again, this was months ago, the way things are right now is that Biden is still doing well in these like three really important swing states. And if that situation doesn't change between now and the election, then Biden is probably has a good chance of winning. And we don't have a better option to propose that does better than Biden in these three specific swing states, which is why we're running him again. That was the logic. And I'm sorry that I don't have a lifelong career in U.S. politics as an advisor, but that's insane. The idea that the situation wouldn't change between 8 months ago and now with a candidate who's 81, 82 years old, the idea that he wouldn't have some kind of stroke or some kind of health issue, or just be really old on TV, which is exactly what happened, and which is exactly what essentially, like officially, what ended his campaign. Basically, is his COVID diagnosis that's gonna take him out of the race for long enough that it would be too bad. Like it would just the final straw on his campaign was the COVID diagnosis. But honestly, it should have been clear for anyone the night of the debate that he needed to drop out. And it should have been clear for anyone months before that debate that it was insane to insist on presenting him as a candidate. But their insistence and the fact that they wasted 8 months, and what they could have done, an 81-year-old getting COVID is not good. Yeah, no, I agree. What they could have done is say, hey, we think Biden has the best chance of beating Trump, but to address the concerns of the majority of Democratic voters who aren't sure about this decision, we are going to have an open primary because we're the Democratic Party. We stand for democratic values, and we are committed to this process. And they could have done that, and if Biden had come out of that actual no thumbs on the scale open primary with other high-profile Democrats jumping into the race, and if Biden had won and they had proper primary debates with Biden on stage, being in front of cameras at his age, showing that he was able to do that in multiple debates and being consistent about it, that would have been so much of a better, because that would have been if he had managed to do that and keep his together through an entire primary campaign, I would have been way more confident in his ability to actually do a general campaign. The fact that they didn't even want to do that made me even more worried about his ability to beat Trump in a general campaign. So they literally played their hand in the worst way possible at every single step in the process. And now the most predictable thing that could have happened has happened. And everyone's hair is on fire in DC because they have 4 months to find a new candidate, put together an entire presidential campaign, and they're also apparently going to be sued by these lawsuits are going to go nowhere, but they're going to get sued by Republican establishments who wanted Biden to stay in the race because he was such a vulnerable candidate to beat, which is why they want him to stay in the race. So they're going to try to sue the Democratic Party to invalidate the change of candidate this late in the race. It's baffling that they didn't do anything to address this ahead of time. And one of the major criticisms that's happened for years in the Democratic Party, as far back as at least Obama, is how ineffective they've been at putting forward new talent. The only big names in U.S. politics right now are big names in spite of the Democratic Party. AOC, who's not running for president, I think she's still too young to run for president, is one of the biggest names in the Democratic Party. Not necessarily because she's the most popular, but she's one of the most prominent politicians in Democratic politics at the moment. Gavin Newsom, just because he's a charismatic guy, governor of California. Gretchen Whitmer, a little bit. Again, she's very popular in what is it, Wisconsin? Michigan, my bad. But they've been, and this is not me coming up with this. I've seen people way better informed than me about U.S. politics do this criticism of they just failed at building up the talent and putting forward. There's 2 generations missing in high-profile Democratic personalities. There's Biden is older than obviously Obama. He's older than George W. Bush. He's older than Clinton. If you have to go back all the way back to the 90s, to the 80s, to find a president who's older than Biden is right now, not even than Biden is right now, because Biden is the oldest president that has ever been in the office. But to find a president who would be older than Biden if that president was still alive, which was George Bush Sr., then you have a problem there. There should be so many more big names. I mean, there's that one guy that I'm trying to think of. There should be 15 Cory Booker aged people as possible nominees. The Kentucky governor, yeah, there's the Kentucky governor is Andy Beshear, right? There should be more people like this. The fact that none of these people were able to win. There's another one, Josh Shapiro. So I think the one of the best options would be Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, as vice president for either Kamala or Gretchen Whitmer would be the best ticket. Well, I think Gretchen Whitmer would be a better option because you would have more of an enthusiastic vote by progressives who really, really, really don't like Kamala. It's not like Gretchen Whitmer is like an AOC type or a Bernie type, but she's closer to that she's like the sweet spot of establishment friendly enough that you won't get insane people who were calling Bernie a communist who was gonna execute billion, like literally people on MSNBC were claiming to be worried for their own safety if Bernie Sanders became president because they were billionaires and they were worried that Bernie would be like a Soviet style leader in the US. But I think Gretchen Whitmer is probably the sweet spot. MSDNC, basically. I think Gretchen Whitmer would be the sweet spot of being left enough to get an enthusiastic vote-ish by progressives, by some of them at least, by many of them at least, and establishment-friendly enough that she won't get completely smeared by the establishment. And Whitmer was the intended target of the alt-right kidnapping attempt by a group called the Wolverine Watchmen. And she should if she were to run, she should use that because it is such a better. It is the perfect counter to the rest of the Pete Buttigieg. No, don't even no. The kidnapping and assassination attempt against Gretchen Whitmer by Trump supporters. It is such a good counter to the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. The assassination attempt against Donald Trump is going to be the focus of, that is going to be the main center of attention for the Trump campaign. Like, look at this person, look at how brave and tough he was when he was shot in the ear, look at how he's being the target of the deep state and Democrats, even though the assassin and there's nothing that links the would-be assassin to any actually politically connected people. Unlike Gretchen Whitmer, who there was an actual far-right connected attempt to kill her for politically motivated reasons. That would be such a good counter to the Trump assassination narrative. So her plus Josh Shapiro, I personally think would be the best ticket, but it's an uphill battle, because Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania's essentially the most important state. The reason why he would be so important because this is the most important state in the United States right now. I'm going to vote. When I vote, I'm going to vote in Texas because that's my last address in the United States, which means that it's not going to be counted because all of the electoral college votes for Texas are going to go to the Republican no matter what. I'm still going to do it for the sake of it, but Texas as a Democrat it's an exercise in just the theatrics of politics to go vote as a Democrat in Texas. I mean, there's also the down ballot stuff. Maybe I'm gonna accidentally elect a local school district person in Texas, but for the presidential election, my vote is not going to count, which sucks. Pennsylvania votes count, and they count a lot, and that is the most important state in the country. There's other states like Michigan, where Gretchen Whitmer is from, that also are among the most important states. Whitmer Shapiro tickets would almost lock in those two states in a way that a Kamala Andy Beshear from Kentucky ticket would not. Kentucky is almost certainly going to go to Kentucky is not a purple state, but getting Whitmer, the popular governor of Michigan, and Shapiro, the popular governor of Pennsylvania, would be, I think, the best way to go, even if you have to, therefore, you have to forfeit the actual campaign funds that is owned by the Biden campaign, because those funds are only allowed to go to Kamala. But there's going to be so much independent expenditure in super PACs that money is basically going to be dwarfed, and it doesn't really. I don't think it matters. The advantage that they would get in Michigan and Pennsylvania just by having those two names on the ballot would outweigh the loss in campaign funds from not having Kamala be the main candidate. I was saying last stream, and this was a bit of an edgy take of mine last stream. I was saying I don't want him to die, and especially after an assassination attempt, I really, really didn't want what I said to be interpreted as a call for violence against Biden at all. But I was saying that probably the best thing that Biden could do at that point was have some kind of a minor heart attack or a stroke or some kind of a minor, a big enough health issue that would take him out of the election, but hopefully he does a full recovery and he can live out the rest of his life as a happy retiree. But the best thing that if he refused to drop out willingly from the race, I was saying that the best thing he could do for the country was have a health issue that would force him to drop out of the race. And a few days later, he was diagnosed with COVID, and yeah, that was almost a guarantee. That was it. That was the final straw. There was enough behind the scenes grumbling and people going there was the funniest one was Nancy Pelosi saying something like, "I stand with Biden, but he has a very small window to make a decision," which is like the most underhanded way of saying that he needed to drop out of the race. It was like, "Oh, do you think he should drop out? I think he has a small window to make that decision. That means yes, he should drop out now as soon as possible. He can't make that decision later. So if he's going to drop out, he needs to do it now." Was basically what she was saying in as many words. So my fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus on all my energies on my duties, which this is really good because this is essentially what I was saying that he should have said in his speech about the assassination attempt, because he was trying to do two things at the same time, where he was trying to do the "I'm above politics, we just need everyone to come together and political violence is really bad," and it was a lot of just letting the Republicans control the narrative. The Republicans were outraged about the political violence and the aggressive rhetoric from Democrats, which, again, it was 10% as aggressive as the Republicans have been for years. And Biden was essentially being uncontroversial, trying to bring people together, fully conceding to the Republican narrative of this was the result of violent rhetoric from Democrats, which is accepting a big L as a candidate. I think it was the right move as a president. That's what presidents are supposed to be. In a lot of countries where presidents are not really that politically important in the day-to-day stuff, Germany or France is different. France actually has an important president, but most parliamentary systems either have a king or a president, and the king and the president is usually the uniting symbolic figure that is there to be above party politics and just to unite the country under one charismatic, nice, uncontroversial figure. That's what Biden was supposed to do, but that's not what a U.S. president can do, especially during an election that is so tight and that is against a basically literal fascist. You can't take that narrative when you're running against a fascist, even if there's political violence. As much as I don't like that there's we're at a point where there's political violence, you can't be. I was hoping that he would do this. The situation is so critical that in a atmosphere of political violence, I need to be the person to unite the country. So I will drop out of the race to focus on running the government and being a uniting figure. And I'm going to let the Democrats figure out who the candidate would be, or I let my running mate Kamala Harris take on the ticket or something like that. That's what I thought he should have done last weekend. It turned out that he didn't use the shooting as the impetus to do that. It basically seems to have been like, again, the final straw was the COVID diagnosis. I'm also 82, which is why I struggle to speak. This came a week late, but I'm glad that it came anyway. Focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Debatable. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement. Ooh, okay, so he's not doing what the better connected journalists were saying he was considering. So he is endorsing Kamala Harris, which probably means it's going to be her. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's see what happens if there's still going to be an open convention. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of backdoor politics here. I think Kamala Harris, optically, she's just not. She doesn't have the presence. She's not particularly good on the debate stage, and she's a constant target of ridicule by the right. For that is in part for that stupid line that she was using, like the what can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Which is like a nice poetic line, but she's used it way too often for it to be effective in any way. Basically what that line is, first of all, it's not folksy and it's too poetic to be like folksy and effective. It's more of a it's more of a poetic line. But what that line could maybe have been a less good version of the Obama, there's no red America and blue America, there's the United States of America. But Obama didn't use that 50 times in 50 different speeches. If he had, people would have made fun of him for that. He used it in one really important speech that became iconic, and that's why that line became iconic. Now, the what can be unburdened by what has been would not have been as iconic, but it's the kind of line that she was probably proud of having come up with that, or her speechwriter coming up with that. She should have saved that line for an important speech and put a lot of emphasis on it and use it once, and that would have been the most impactful way of using that line. But the fact that she used it like 50 different times in 50 different speeches is an easy thing to make fun of. Anyway, so Biden did endorse Kamala Harris. I'm not too surprised. I wasn't sure he would. I think that he considered not doing it, according to a lot of people who are better connected than I am. I say better connected than I am. I'm not connected at all. So that doesn't mean anything. But people who actually knew were having like unnamed sources from inside the Democratic Party, from inside of the campaign, were saying that he was considering not endorsing Kamala Harris and just letting the process take place. But yeah. Not going to lie, if Harris starts maniacally laughing at Trump in the debate, she is going to win in all 50 states. That would actually be funny. And that would be a very funny meme. Don't forget to like and follow. This was a clip from the weekly Barely Informed live stream. You can catch it every Sunday on the main Barely Informed YouTube channel. And please support us on Patreon. The link for both of those are down below.